He kept the television on every single night for 11 years. Not because there was anything worth watching, not because he was entertained, but because silence had become the enemy. When the screen went dark, the thoughts came back, the ones with no answers, the ones that circled and never landed anywhere. His name was Gerald. He was 73 years old. He had been a carpenter his whole life. He had built things with his hands that would outlast him. He was proud of that, but he did not know what to do with the version of himself that existed when no one needed anything from him. And that is where this story begins. Tonight I will give you one simple rule that makes silence feel safe again. Most people think loneliness is about other people. They think it is about an empty house, an empty chair, an empty phone. But Gerald did not have an empty house. His daughter called twice a week. His neighbour Frank came by on Sundays. His life was not without people. Gerald's loneliness was different. It was the kind you carry inside, the kind that sits right beside you, even when the room is full. It was the loneliness of not knowing how to be with the one person you can never get away from, yourself. I want to tell you Gerald's story because it is not dramatic. It does not have a single explosive turning point. It has something quieter and more real, a slow thaw, a gradual return, a man learning for the very first time at 73 how to be his own company. And I think if you stay with me all the way through, something in you is going to recognize itself, because what happened to Gerald is happening to a lot of people right now. Most of them just do not have the words for it yet. Gerald retired at 68. He had planned for the finances. He had a pension. He had some savings. He was responsible and careful, and he had done everything right. What he had not planned for was the hours. At the shop, he had been needed from 7 in the morning until the work was done. There was always a next thing, a next board to cut, a next joint to fit, a next problem to solve, a next person asking something of him. And then, one Friday afternoon, he handed in his apron and drove home and sat down at the kitchen table, and the next thing did not come. He waited for it. He thought it would arrive. Some new version of purpose, some new rhythm, some feeling of, okay, now what? But it did not come that Friday, or that weekend, or that first month. What came instead was a strange restlessness, a low hum of unease that followed him from room to room. He took up woodworking at home because it was what he knew, but working alone in the garage felt different from the shop. There was no one to show the thing to when it was done. No one to say, "Well done, Gerald." No one to need it. He joined a walking group. He lasted 3 weeks. The conversation felt shallow. He did not know how to enter it. He started watching more television, then more, then all evening, then with the volume up, because quiet had started to feel like a sound itself, a loud, uncomfortable sound. His daughter noticed. She came one Sunday and said, "Dad, are you okay?" He said, "Yes, fine. I am fine." And he meant it in the way that people mean it when they have not yet found the words for what is actually wrong, because he could not have told her what was wrong. He did not know yet. He only knew that something felt off, that the version of himself that existed when no one was watching, when nothing was required, when there was no task and no role and no usefulness, that version made him uncomfortable. He did not like spending time with it, and so he avoided it, with noise, with screens, with motion to fill space. This went on for almost 5 years. Now here is the part I want you to really hear, because it matters. Gerald was not depressed. He was not ill. He was not falling apart. He was functioning. He was fine by every external measure, but inside he had quietly become a stranger to himself. He had spent 50 years being defined by what he did, by the role he played, by the usefulness he provided. And when that scaffolding came down, there was no one standing inside it that he recognized. Many people experience some version of this, not always as sadness, sometimes as boredom, sometimes as irritability, sometimes as a need to stay busy, sometimes as a discomfort with stillness, as if stillness is something you have to escape. It started the way real changes often start, not with a decision, but with an accident. He woke up at 3 a.m, which he often did, and reached for the television remote, which he always did. But the remote was not on the nightstand. He must have knocked it off. He reached down to find it, and his back seized. He lay very still, waiting for the pain to pass. And in the silence, with no screen and no sound, he noticed something strange. He noticed his own breathing. Not in a meditation sense, not in any practiced or deliberate way. He just heard it. In the complete quiet of the room, his own breath going in and out, steady and slow, and for reasons he could not explain. Something about that sound was not unpleasant. He lay there for 20 minutes, not because he chose to, but because his back would not let him move, and the remote was somewhere on the floor, and getting up felt like too much. And in those 20 minutes, something very small happened. The silence did not attack him. The thoughts came. Yes. But they were just thoughts. They moved like clouds, not like enemies. When his back finally eased and he got up and found the remote, he turned the television on, and then, almost immediately, turned it off again and went to sleep. That is not a dramatic story. That is not a transformation. That was just a Tuesday night in February in an ordinary house with an ordinary man lying in an ordinary dark room. But it was the first crack in 11 years of noise. The next night he turned the television off an hour earlier than usual. He did not meditate. He did not journal. He did not do anything intentional or therapeutic. He just sat in the chair by the window with a cup of tea and looked at the dark garden, and the discomfort came the way it always did. That restless, low-level hum, that itch to fill the space. But this time, he did not immediately scratch it, and he noticed what the quiet actually contained. Not monsters, not disasters, just small human things. The refrigerator clicking on in the kitchen, a faint wind moving through the trees, the ticking of a clock he had never really heard before, his own breath, and the simple fact that he was still here. He sat with it for a few minutes, not because it was pleasant, but because he was curious about what it actually was. When he stopped running, and what he found was that the discomfort was mostly habit, unfamiliarity. A man who had never sat still, without a purpose, without a task, without being watched. Over the following weeks, he began doing something he could not quite name. He would call it later. In conversation with his daughter, just sitting. He started with 10 minutes, because 10 minutes felt manageable. He would make his tea, take it to the chair by the window, and simply be there with whatever thoughts showed up, without running from them, and without chasing them either. The first week was uncomfortable. The thoughts were not deep or poetic. They were mostly mundane. Did I take my medication? I should call Frank. That fence post is still leaning, but slowly. Something shifted. And what happened next surprised him, because it was not sadness that showed up. It was something gentler. By the second week, he noticed that some of the thoughts that came were not mundane at all. They were old thoughts, things he had not visited in years. A memory of his late wife, Carol, buying fabric at the market on a Saturday, the look on her face when she found something she liked, the sound of her laugh. He had been careful not to think about Carol, not because he did not miss her, but because he thought the missing would be unbearable. He thought if he opened that door, he would not be able to close it again. But sitting there in the quiet, the memory of Carol at the fabric market did not break him open. It just arrived. And it was warm, the way a memory of something good can be warm, even when the person is gone. He sat with it, the way he was learning to sit with everything now, without rushing to resolve it, without turning it into anything more than it was. Just a memory, just Carol, just Saturday, just the market. And he noticed that he felt slightly less alone, sitting in the quiet with her memory. than he had felt. With the television on all evening, most of us run from stillness because we think the things waiting in the stillness will hurt us. And some things are in there: grief, regret, questions with no answers. But here is what Gerald discovered. The running is what makes them large. Avoiding something gives it power. Sitting with it gives it shape. And once it has shape, it is just a human thing that needed a moment of your attention. Gerald spent about 3 months in this stage, learning to sit, learning to let thoughts come and go, learning to be in a room without requiring that room to entertain him. And during those 3 months, something else began to happen, something he had not expected at all. He started to like himself a little more, not in a big, confident way, not in a I have figured everything out way, in a quiet way, the way you start to like someone after you have spent enough time with them to see who they actually are. He had been so focused on doing for so long that he had never really gotten to know the person who was doing all the doing. And now, in the quiet mornings and the still evenings, he was meeting that person and finding that the person was not so bad. He discovered he had strong feelings about birds, specifically that he found them genuinely interesting. He could not have told you that before because he had never sat still long enough to notice that he was noticing them. He had memories he had never revisited, good ones. Meals that he could still taste if he tried. Moments with Carol, moments with his daughter when she was small, the smell of a job well done, the feeling of fitting 2 pieces of wood together perfectly and knowing it would hold. He had a sense of humour that he had mostly kept locked away because there was no one around to deploy it on, but sitting quietly. He found himself, occasionally, just mildly amused by nothing in particular, by the neighbour's cat walking across the fence, by the particular way the light hit the window at 4 in the afternoon. Small amusements, tiny pleasures that he had been moving too fast to notice. Montaigne wrote something in the 16th century. The greatest thing in the world is to know how to be your own company. Gerald had never heard of Montaigne. He was a carpenter from a small town who had never been to college, who had not read philosophy, but he was living the truth of that sentence. In an armchair with a cup of tea, looking at a garden. By the time spring came, Gerald had made a series of changes. None of them were dramatic. All of them were small, and the accumulation of small had changed the texture of his entire life. He had created a morning ritual, not a wellness routine, not a productivity system, just a ritual. He woke up. He made tea. He sat by the window for 20 minutes. He wrote 3 sentences in a small notebook, not a journal, just 3 sentences about whatever was on his mind, or whatever had been in a dream, or whatever he had noticed the day before. 3 sentences. That was it. Sometimes they were ordinary. Tea is good today. The garden needs water. I dreamed about the shop. Sometimes they surprised him. I miss being known by someone. I wonder if I was a good enough father. I think I am happier than I was a year ago. He did not analyse the sentences. He did not do anything with them. He just wrote them. And then closed the notebook and went about his day. Those 3 sentences became a kind of anchor. A daily meeting with himself, a way of saying, I am here, I notice things, I am a person with a perspective. He also changed his relationship with walking. He had walked before, but always as exercise, always tracking distance, always slightly impatient to be done. Now he walked without a destination sometimes, no goal, no route, no podcast, just his feet and the air and the neighbourhood. He noticed things he had walked past 1,000 times without seeing. The specific colour of a particular tree, the sound of a school at recess from a block away, a dog looking at him from a gate with tremendous seriousness. And he noticed something simple. Attention changes the texture of a day. By summer, his daughter came for a visit, and she sat across from him at the kitchen table, and she looked at him for a long moment, and she said, Dad, something is different about you. He said, different how? She thought about it. She said, you seem more comfortable, like you are more settled in yourself. He nodded. He said, I think I've been getting to know myself a little better. She laughed. She said, that is the strangest thing I have ever heard you say. He laughed too. It was strange, for a man his age, to be meeting himself for the first time. But strange does not mean wrong. Now I want to zoom out from Gerald's story for a moment. The relationship you have with yourself is the longest relationship of your life, and yet most people never deliberately invest in that relationship. They invest in their marriage. They put effort into friendships. They call their children. They maintain their car. But the relationship with themselves, they leave to run on default. Whatever voice has been there since childhood, whatever habits formed under pressure, whatever self-image was built in the early years, and often, the default is not kind. Gerald began to notice the commentary, the way it ran beneath his thoughts. Should have fixed that years ago. You let people down. What kind of man sits around looking at birds? He had never noticed it before, because it had always been drowned out by noise. It was just the water he swam in, unexamined, constant, mostly unkind. And when he began to sit in the quiet, he could finally hear it. And hearing it, he could finally question it. Is that true? Is it useful? Would I say that to anyone else? Usually, the answer was no. No, it is not entirely true. No, it is not useful. And no, I would never say that to a person I cared about. He started talking back to the voice, not aggressively, just fair. If the voice said, "You let people down," he would think. Sometimes yes, but also sometimes not. Also I showed up many times. Also I loved the people I had. Also I built things that helped people. Not a fight, just a correction. Just a refusal to accept the harshest version as the only version. And gradually the voice lost authority. It became one voice among many, rather than the only voice in the room. Now here is the second moment that quietly changed everything. The first time he caught that voice and answered it like a friend. I want to tell you about one specific afternoon in October, because it is the moment Gerald himself points to when he thinks about when things really changed. He was walking one of his destination-free walks, and he passed a playground, and there were two small children on swings, being pushed by a grandfather. Gerald stopped and watched for a moment, without thinking about why, and he felt something. Clean and simple. Contentment, not happiness in a big way, just a quiet, settled feeling of, this is enough, right now. This moment is enough. He walked home and sat in his chair and thought, I have not felt that way in a very long time. And he realized it was because he had finally stopped measuring his life against the life he thought it should be. He had stopped comparing himself to the Gerald of 30 years ago, capable and physical and needed. He had stopped comparing this afternoon to an imaginary afternoon somewhere else, where everything was more meaningful. He had been present, watching a grandfather push two children on swings, and that moment was enough. Now I want to give you something practical. Because stories without tools are just entertainment, and you deserve more than entertainment. You deserve tools that actually work. I am going to give you 3 practices, not a program, not a transformation plan, just 3 simple things that build the skill Gerald built. Practice 1, the 10-minute sit every morning, before the phone, before the news, before the noise. Sit somewhere comfortable with something warm in your hands and do nothing for 10 minutes. Not meditation, not performance, just sitting. Let the thoughts come, let them go. Be mildly curious about what arrives. Start with 10 minutes. If 10 is too much, start with 5. If 5 is too much, start with 2. The length matters less than the consistency. You are training the habit of showing up for your own company. Practice 2. 3 sentences. Before you sleep, write 3 sentences. They can be ordinary. Tea was good today. I saw a hawk. I am tired. Or they can be deeper, but only if they want to be. No pressure, no performance. Just 3 sentences. Over time, you will read them back and you will find something surprising. You will find a person you are glad to have known. Practice 3. The kind correction. Notice the voice inside your head, the commentary. The narrator. When it is unkind, do not fight it. Do not shame yourself for having it. Just offer a correction, the way a good friend would. Not fake positivity, just fairness, just the full picture. Over time, the fairer voice gets strong because you keep feeding it. And if you want 2 gentle bonuses, walk once a week without a destination and choose one small pleasure each day for no reason other than that it is yours. Now let me bring you back to Gerald one final time. His story ends quietly. It is a Tuesday morning in November, about 14 months after the night with the remote on the floor. He is sitting in his chair by the window with his tea, and the light is coming through the glass, low and golden and slightly melancholy, and he is just there. His mind wanders to Carol, to the fabric at the market, to her laugh. He sits with the warmth of that for a moment. His mind wanders to the fence post that is still leaning. He adds it to a mental list. He will do it Thursday. His mind wanders to the shape of the light on the carpet, and he thinks, that is a very specific gold. I do not know if I have seen that exact colour before. He finishes his tea. He writes his 3 sentences. Carol and the fabric market. The fence on Thursday. November light is its own kind of gold. He closes the notebook, and he sits for one more moment before the day begins. And in that moment, Gerald feels something that took him 73 years and 14 months to arrive at. He feels at home inside himself. Tonight, turn the TV off 10 minutes early and meet the person inside the house.